Hey guys, I am the 50s kid, and today I've got the 2000 Honda Odyssey in, and I'm going to do the timing belt on it. Now, in order to do a timing belt on one of these engines, on any Honda engine, this is a V6 engine, so this kind of applies to basically every Honda V6 engine almost. In order to do that, the job, you actually need a special tool in order to hold the crank pulley in place, and this is what it looks like. This was about $25 on eBay, and if you don't have this, it's going to be really difficult to do this. This basically slips into the crank pulley, and it allows you to slip a breaker bar onto it like that. It slips into the crank pulley, and it holds it in place while you then come in with a 19mm socket on another breaker bar and slip that over the crank pulley bolt and get it free that way. If you don't have this tool, you can't do the job. There are a couple of other ways to do it without the tool that I have seen. Mostly people tend to just use this kind of setup. They put this onto the crank pulley bolt, and then I've seen people use their starter to try to shock it free, to crank it free. It does work, and it also breaks your breaker bar and or causes other damage. So you know, if you want to try that route, go look for those videos on YouTube, and you can do that if you want to. I don't recommend doing it that way. I recommend getting the proper tool. It's only $25, and you know, honestly, just make life easier on yourself and get the proper tool. You know. Okay guys, before we get started, let's talk about a couple of the other parts that you're going to need when you do this job. I actually bought a whole timing belt kit, and with it I got new pulleys, new water pump, and a new hydraulic tensioner along with the belt. Also I got some new oil seals. Let's talk about tensioners first. There are two types of tensioner. The one that I have on the car is the other type. It's much longer. It looks like a grenade because when you buy a new one, it has a little pin in it that's holding the piston down in. And once you put it on the vehicle, you pull the pin out, and that will release the pin and apply tension. This is the other kind. This has a little bracket that goes over to hold the tensioner in. This is the better kind because this kind is much easier to. The other kind, the long grenade kind, those actually leak, and once they leak, they're junk. You have to throw them away. You can't fix them. But this kind, if it does, you know, if any of the oil does leak out, you can take the screw off and refill it with motor oil. And in order to for those grenade types, in order to reset them, if you do decide to reuse them, you can basically just use your bench vise to press the pin back in, and then you're going to need, since you don't have that pin, you're going to need like a drill bit or a nail, whatever is going to fit through those little holes and hold the tension in there. And then you just reinstall it on the vehicle and pull the nail out with a pair of pliers, and you're good to go. But if you have this kind, you can reset the tension by taking off this screw and then using a flathead screwdriver to turn it, I forget which way, and that will retract the piston in. And the problem is that you're going to need one of these brackets in order to hold the piston in, and you're probably not going to have this bracket if you're taking this off the vehicle, which is why I say, you know, just get a new one and get a kit. And here's the reason you want to get a kit. You want to replace your water pump whenever you do a timing belt. Why? Well, first of all, you might as well, because, you know, if you do have to replace the water pump for some other reason later on, you're going to have to do the same job all over again. So convenience, you know, for one thing. But for another thing, I mean, if you think about it, a water pump is actually a pretty simple thing. It's just, you know, a slab of aluminum with a gasket on one side. There's a shaft going through the middle, impeller on one side, pulley on the other. Very simple, very basic, but there's also a bearing in here, and that is the heart of the water pump. And after, you know, 100,000 miles, a bearing starts to go. That's why you actually want to replace your tensioners as well. This is what a bad bearing sounds like. And that's going to start to sound really, really bad, more and more horrible as time goes on, and it can actually fail, and it could cause your timing belt to skip a couple of teeth, and if you have an interference engine, your pistons are going to contact your valves, bend them, and you're going to need a valve job. So you want to, you know, on this particular car, there are two pulleys along with the water pump. On some vehicles, you only replace the water pump and the timing belt, but on this one, you get two pulleys as well. And these pulleys also have bearings in them. You can see that's the bearing right there. So it's a good idea to replace bearings. Anything that has a bearing every time you do a water pump. I mean a timing belt. So I recommend buying the kit. I think I got this for $100 $1,520 or something like that. It also comes with new oil seals too. So I consider it good money. I believe actually we spent maybe a little bit more, and I got valve cover gaskets along with this, which I already did in another video, which you may have seen. So now I'm forgetting the exact cost, but you know, they're basically in the $100 to $100 something, you know, $140 range, and there are all kinds of kits out there. But keep a lookout for a kit with this kind of tensioner. This is the kind that I would buy, and then, you know, basically you save this bracket for next time, because you shouldn't have to buy another tensioner next time. But there you go. First things first, you need to jack up your car and put it on jack stands, just the front really. And you also need to remove your passenger side wheel. Now I've already removed the, I've actually kind of removed part of the bottom splash shield, as you can see underneath the vehicle there. Those push pins are kind of a pain in the butt to deal with. So you have to remove these kinds of push pins from the bottom of the splash shield, and basically when they're pressed down all the way, you kind of have to, you can slip a screwdriver in this way and sort of pry up. You know, you twist your flat screwdriver and it'll pry it out, and it'll get it out just enough so I can take my side cutting pliers in and kind of grab it, and then you know, pull it out or lever it out. You pull out the middle pin, then you can finally pull out this pin. And I basically removed one from here. There's another one, I believe, down here, and then there are 3 along the front, or somewhere along the front. And if you remove just basically those ones, you'll be able to kind of peel the splash shield back and out of the way. I've just got it folded up kind of underneath the vehicle, just to get it out of the way. So this is the crank pulley, and that's the crank pulley bolt right there. That's the one we're going to try to get loose in just a minute. But for now, I'm just going to show you how I'm putting the 19mm deep socket on there with my breaker bar. I'm going to be turning it clockwise, because what I want to do is we want to set it to top dead center before we actually get the bolt loose, and we need the bolt to be tight in order to do that. So this is what I'm going to be doing from down below here, but we're going to be able to, we're going to tell that it's at top dead center by looking at the timing covers up above. These are the 2 timing covers right here, and you'll see there are these little rubber grommets here that you kind of pull down, and you now have a little peephole basically to take a look at the crankshaft, the camshaft pulley. And as I rotate the engine, we're going to look for a number. Actually, we might have lucked out here. I think that actually is the number 1 right there. So yeah, check that out. We kind of lucked out here, and we just happen to be right on number 1. You'll actually see, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And as you and then also you can see there's a little notch down at the bottom right here. That's where the number has to line up with. And you'll just kind of turn the crankshaft, turn the pulley clockwise until it lines up. Helps to do this with a ratchet. And you don't want to go too far over like that. That's basically where we need to be. Before I try anything, I'm going to hit that nut with a little bit of PB Blaster. Just let it soak in there. So you can see that I've got my breaker bar positioned directly, and it's resting against the drive shaft right here. And I needed to rotate it back just a little bit. That's okay, as you know, as long as it's basically in the position of top dead of number 1 cylinder, so that way you don't have to keep cranking everything all the way around. That's okay. You can just kind of rotate it back or forwards as you need to in order to get the tool on there. Now I've got my 19mm socket with the breaker bar, the other breaker bar here, and I've also got my one of the handles from my floor jack, one of the sections of it. I'm going to use this to extend this breaker bar right here so that I can get more leverage on it. So I'm going to slip it over the breaker bar, just kind of come up, and I'll slip that kind of behind the shield, and then I'm just going to pull. And that's Harbor Freight for you. Okay, this time I've got my 1/2-inch ratchet on there. I just don't have another 1/2-inch breaker bar, unfortunately. So hopefully this will work. Well, there we go. It's loose. Very cool. Okay, so now I've taken my floor jack and I put a piece of wood on top of it, and I'm now supporting the engine on the oil pan, and I've just basically taken up tension. So the rest of the job is actually pretty straightforward. We got to remove the power steering pump, we got to remove the engine mount and the engine mount bracket, which is actually attached to the engine. Then we got to remove the timing covers, change the timing belt, put everything back. To take out the engine mount, there are 3 fasteners. They're all 14s, 2 back here and 1 here. Wow. Sometimes you need something bigger. There are also 2 more down here. I needed a breaker bar to crack those loose because I happen to know these motor mounts were changed at some point in the past, so somebody must have used a gigantic torque wrench to just put those on there rather than torquing them like they're supposed to. I mean, they used a gigantic impact. Need to unclip this here. Forgot about that. Make sure the rubber's not cracked. If any of this rubber's cracked or deteriorated, it's time to replace it. But like I said, I know this was replaced recently, so now we can take off the power steering pump. There are 2 10s here that hold the pressure line on there, and I'm gonna remove this carefully. You don't want to drip power steering fluid on your belts or your hoses, because oil will eat through rubber. And I'm going to take this and sort of tuck it up here behind the wiring harness that runs up along the firewall, just to kind of keep it out of the way. There is a 12mm fastener basically right there where I'm slipping my wrench over it. That is one of the power steering pump bolts. I'm just going to crack it free for now. There's another one back behind the power steering pump, right underneath this little bracket here. I'm also going to loosen that one just for now. This is the tensioner right here. Again, still 12. I'm going to loosen that quite a bit. And I should have broke this free, but maybe I didn't take enough off of here. Yeah, that's the case. That just needed to be slightly looser, and now you can see the power steering pump moves down. We can take off the belt. I'm just going to set it down here for now. You can get this bolt out by hand. And down here, this is a nut. I'm going to pull the pump up off the engine, and I'm going to kind of feed it through right here. So I can basically just set the pump aside right here on top of a rag, and it'll be here up out of the way while I can continue on with the rest of the stuff. I'll remove the belts at this point. Come Come in here with a 14 mil wrench. Rotate this way. Off tension. And it's actually just, it's kind of easier to fish the belt off from underneath. Also going to take off the power steering belt. I'm going to inspect the belts too. And power steering belt's pretty cracked. Power steering pump belt. So I'll be replacing that one. And I'm guessing that, oh yeah, that one's cracked as well. Pretty badly. So I'll be replacing both of these. So next we need to remove the oil dipstick tube. There's one 10 millimeter fastener. That's kind of tricky. It's not really, you can't really see it here from this angle, but we gotta get it out. And there we go. And you kind of just pull it out. There's an O-ring on it right there. You're supposed to replace it, just so you know. To remove the front timing cover, first we gotta get this bolt out here. This just holds down this wiring harness here. Take this little rubber guy out, because this wiring harness goes through here, goes through this part of the cover. There are 4 10 millimeter bolts holding the cover on. 1, 2, 3, and then fourth one's down underneath here. There's a 5th fastener right in between here. There are also 5 fasteners around the back cover. There, and then also through here. Just remove this wiring harness here. They don't give you much room. Get that wiring harness out of there. So this is very interesting right here. Now that I have the front timing cover off, I've actually noticed that the mark that I thought was the number 1 before is actually not a 1. It's actually just the timing mark, and the numbers are actually written above that. It's kind of hard to make out, but that was actually a 6 right there. And here's the number 1 over here. And you can see that the 4 is down here, and here's the 2, here's the 5, and here's the 3. Now, what we actually have to do is continue to rotate the crank pulley, and we have to align it up with, there's a mark on the back of the timing cover. This is the actual timing mark on the back of the timing cover right here, the front timing cover. I'm going to rotate the crankshaft pulleys until number 1, which is down here. Now that I can see that, here's number 1, here's the timing mark. I'm going to rotate things so that its timing mark is up and aligned with that mark. There we go. At this point, I'm going to use my jack to actually raise the engine up so that I can get a little bit better access to some of the bolts on there. I'm going to use a 14mm socket to remove the 3 engine mount bracket bolts. There, and there. Top one's a little bit longer than the bottom one. I'm going to unscrew this fastener. It's number 10. So now we need to remove the fasteners from the lower timing cover, and I'm going to remove the ones on the top because I can get at the bottom ones from underneath the engine, from underneath the car. There's one here. These are all 10s. There's one here. And there's one on the other side back underneath over here. You can see that the engine mount is actually, it's very free, and once I take the bottom timing cover off, it's probably going to fall down. So I'm going to put one of those bolts back in. Just kind of thread it on a little bit, just to hold it, keep it from falling. Once that happens, because I just kind of did that out of sequence, but no big deal. Okay, now I'm going to remove the crank pulley bolt. It's a big one. Crank pulleys off. Okay, let's remove those 4 bolts. And it's going to come out through the top. There's a washer right here, and you can see that on this side there's actually an imprint of the teeth of the timing belt. I think it's like dirt or something, so I'm going to leave that so that way I know which side goes down. If you don't have that on yours, you'll feel that there's a bevel to this side, and it's just sort of dimpled in the back. You can see that there's a little arrow right there. That's a timing mark, and you can't see yours, clean it off, but there's a little arrow on the housing up here, and that's how you realign the pulleys if they, once you have the timing belt off, if the pulleys get misaligned, that's how you realign each one. Each pulley has its own little set of timing marks, and that's how you align them. As you can see, this area is actually pretty greasy. That's because there was an oil leak from the valve cover gasket, which I've already repaired, but this is all just old gunk and old oil that's attracted a lot of dirt. And I want to clean this off. I'm going to spray some engine degreaser on this and clean it off, because when I crack the water pump and let it drain, the coolant's going to flow over this. I'm going to catch it in my drain bin, and I actually want to reuse the coolant. So I'm going to clean up the engine first before I do that. In fact, I might even hit it with my pressure washer in the morning, because it's actually getting pretty late tonight. So I'm not quite sure yet. But first, what I'm going to do is put the oil dipstick tube back in right here, because if I don't cover this up, anything I spray on here is going to get down into the oil pan. So time to put that back in.